The rain was clawing at the living room windows like 100 desperate fingers. It was a typical Tuesday afternoon, or so I thought. My 5-year-old son, Toby, was sitting on the rug, silently building a tower out of wooden blocks. Suddenly, the tower collapsed. But Toby didn't cry or reach for another block. He froze, his small head tilted upward, staring intently at the ceiling. The old wooden floorboards of our rented 2-story suburban home hummed with the vibration of the storm outside. But then, a sound cut through the drone of the rain. Creak, 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 asterisk. It was the distinct, rhythmic sound of footsteps pacing directly above us, in the master bedroom. I felt a cold drop of sweat slide down my neck. My husband, David, was away on a business trip in Chicago and wasn't due back for another 2 days. We lived in a quiet, secluded neighborhood, and I had locked the front door myself. Before I could even process the sound, Toby scrambled toward me. He didn't make a sound, which terrified me more than any scream could have. He grabbed the hem of my sweater with trembling hands, climbed into my lap, and pressed his face against my neck. In a breath so faint I barely caught it, he whispered, "Mom. Hide." My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. "Toby, sweetie, is someone up there?" I whispered back, my voice shaking. He didn't answer. He just pointed a trembling finger toward the dark hallway that led to the staircase, his wide, tear-filled eyes begging me to obey. I knew I had to act. Slowly, keeping my body low, I guided Toby toward the small pantry under the stairs. It was cramped, smelling of onions and dry cereal, but it was the safest place. I kissed his forehead, looked him straight in the eyes, and whispered, "Stay here. Do not make a sound, no matter what." "Okay," Toby nodded, pulling his knees to his chest. I closed the pantry door softly, leaving him in the dark. Left alone in the dim light of the living room, a fierce, protective instinct took over my fear. I reached into the umbrella stand near the door and pulled out a heavy, solid brass handle umbrella. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it would have to do. I crept toward the staircase. Every step felt like walking through wet cement. The air upstairs felt cold, smelling faintly of damp earth and old paper. Creak, asterisk. The footsteps had stopped. Now, there was a strange, low rustling sound, like paper being frantically shuffled. I reached the top of the stairs, my knuckles white around the umbrella handle. The master bedroom door, which I always kept shut, was cracked open. A thin sliver of light from the hallway lamp spilled into the room, cutting through the shadows. I braced myself, pushed the door open, and raised my weapon, ready to scream, ready to fight. But the sight inside froze me instantly. There was no masked intruder. There was no burglar. Sitting on the edge of our bed was David. He was wearing his heavy winter coat, drenched in rain, his hair plastered to his forehead. He looked exhausted, pale, and entirely hollowed out. Scattered all over the bed were old, dusty legal folders, birth certificates, and bank statements that we kept locked in a fireproof safe in the closet, a safe only David and I knew the combination to. "David," I gasped, lowering the umbrella. "What are you doing? You're supposed to be in Chicago. You scared Toby half to death." He didn't look up at me. He just kept staring at a faded photograph in his hands. "I couldn't do it anymore, Sarah," he whispered. His voice sounded like it had been dragged over broken glass. "Do what? What is going on?" I stepped closer, my confusion rapidly turning into a deep, nodding dread. David finally raised his head. His eyes were red, brimming with tears. "I didn't go to Chicago. I haven't been going to any business trips for the last 6 months." The room fell dead silent, save for the rain beating against the glass. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He gestured to the documents on the bed. "The company, the firm I worked for. They were involved in something highly illegal, Sarah. Offshore accounts, money laundering, fraud. 6 months ago, I found out. When I tried to quietly resign, they threatened me. They threatened us. They told me if I went to the authorities, they would make sure you and Toby paid the price." My breath hitched. I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. "So, I pretended," David sobbed, burying his face in his hands. "I pretended to go to work. I pretended to fly out of state. Instead, I've been living in cheap motels, secretly working with a federal prosecutor to build a case against them. I had to keep you completely out of it. If you didn't know anything, you were safer. The FBI told me to stay away from the house entirely so we wouldn't draw attention. Then why are you here now?" I rushed to the bed, grabbing his cold hands. "David, Toby is downstairs hiding in the pantry. He thought someone was breaking in. David looked at me, a sudden, sheer terror freezing his features. Sarah, I didn't enter through the front door. I used the back window to avoid being seen. But when I got up here, I realized, my car wasn't the only one parked down the street. He pulled me toward the window, gently parting the curtains. Down on the rain-slicked curb, a black SUV sat idling, its headlights turned off. They found out I was talking to the feds, David whispered, his grip on my hand tightening to the point of pain. They followed me. I came back to get these documents, the original hard copies they need to prosecute. We have to leave, now. Just then, the floorboards downstairs creaked. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't Toby. A heavy, deliberate step had just crossed our living room threshold. The front door, which I had locked, had been quietly bypassed. My heart stopped. Toby was down there, in the pantry, right next to the stairs. David saw the realization hit my face. He grabbed a heavy folder from the bed, his eyes blazing with a mixture of terror and fierce determination. Go to Toby, he whispered. There is a fire escape through the guest bathroom window. I'll draw them upstairs. As soon as you hear them come up, you take Toby and run to the neighbor's house. Call the number on this sticky note. He shoved a small piece of paper into my hand with a phone number and the letters *FBI scribbled on it. No, David, I can't leave you. I cried quietly. You have to, he said, kissing me fiercely. For Toby, run. I didn't have time to argue. I slipped out of the bedroom and crept down the hallway, keeping to the shadows. As I reached the top of the stairs, I saw a tall silhouette standing at the bottom, holding a flashlight. From the master bedroom, David purposely knocked over a heavy ceramic lamp. It shattered loudly. The silhouette instantly looked up, turned off the flashlight, and began quietly, rapidly ascending the stairs, passing right by the dark alcove where I was crouching. The moment the figure cleared the landing, I sprinted down the stairs. I threw open the pantry door. Toby was huddled in the corner, eyes wide. Mom, he whispered. Shish. I placed a hand over his mouth, pulled him into my arms, and ran out the back door into the pouring rain. We ran through the muddy backyard, scaling the low wooden fence into our neighbor's yard. I pounded on their door, screaming for help. Within seconds, our neighbor, an elderly retired cop, opened the door. I shoved Toby into his arms and gasped, "Call the police. Call this number, now." As the sirens began to wail in the distance, I looked back at our house. Two men in dark suits hurried out of our front door, empty-handed, and sped away in the black SUV just before the police cruisers blocked the street. David had managed to lock himself in the master bedroom, keeping the primary evidence safe until the authorities arrived. That night, the truth upstairs changed our lives forever. We lost our quiet suburban routine, our rented home, and our old identities. But as I sat in a safe house hours later, wrapped in a blanket with Toby asleep in my lap and David holding my hand, I knew we had survived the worst of it. We were starting over, completely in the light, with no more secrets left to hide.